Hello everybody, this is Pramod Nair of the Department of English, the University of Hyderabad, and here we continue our exploration of posthumanism in other domains. We've already looked at bioart in the previous module, and there we noted the fact that the mixture of biological material, which might be deemed to be natural, with technology, which we might call cultural, is often used as a way of provoking thinking about, say, environmental pollution, questions of identity, questions of ethics, and questions of origin and evolution. Through various examples, we have seen how posthumanist influence is very visible, very tangible in the way these artworks demolish the barricade, the barrier between nature and culture, and draw attention to the fact that we have, as in humans, have always co-evolved with technology, and that biological matter has been commodified, rendered into consumer products, and been the source of identity politics, biopolitics as it has been called. It has been the source also of emancipatory potential. So we should not think of bioart as just another maverick, eccentric way of thinking about artistic materials. Yes, it is the use of biological matter as artistic material, as a substrate on which art is being produced. But that's not the only purpose for which biological matter is being utilized. Bioart is a method, is a process, is a domain in which very serious ethical, technological questions and philosophical concerns are being addressed, and we looked at some of these. Particularly in the last example we took of sentinel species, where an artist, Cecile Meriton, injected microplastics into her own blood and monitored how her blood and its macrophages responded to these. The point that Cecile Meriton and her collaborators, who are from medicine and immunology and other biological sciences, were pointing to was, we always think of other species as sentinel species. But what about humans themselves? Are we not sentinel species? Can we not be sentinel species? What stops us from being sentinel species? So the point is to ask ethical and moral questions also about the way in which humans have utilized biological matter. In today's module, we will look at posthuman performance arts. And one of the artists that I want to pay some attention to, which I have already mentioned before, is Stelarc. I mentioned him in passing about him attaching an extra ear and adding an extra arm with which he wrote the word evolution, right? He wrote it with all three hands. There is a website which you might want to visit for Stelarc. It may or may not be something everybody wants to watch. Some of you might find it a little too visceral, too much based in the corporeal grossness of our bodies. He has several projects, most of which have been seen as pioneering and provoking very deep, very serious questions about what humans are, what biological matter is. Anyway, so you might want to take a look at Stelarc's performance pieces. Posthuman performance arts focus on the rise of what has been called composite bodies. Composite bodies are a mixture of the human and the non-human. And the mixture of the human and the non-human produces a third body, a third type of body, right? One which has different new capacities of form and function. Why is this important? You will remember we have already spoken about Cremaster, Matthew Cremaster. We have spoken about art which is clearly meant to be a mixture of biological matter and technology. And of course, the fact, the myth, the possibility of chimeras, of the mixture of genetic lines becoming a possible future of human evolution. So Stelarc and posthuman art when they talk about composite bodies, are gesturing precisely at that. So the composite body is one which is endowed with new capacities of form and function. Posthuman performance gives more space and importance to things, right? Not necessarily things as objects, because objects have value and humans bestow that value, but just things. Now, whereas in traditional performance, the movement is that of the human and the objects just stay in the background as what is called props. But in posthuman performance, the prop is itself modified so that props possess agency, they can enact action, and they can enact movement, which is to say that movement and agency are not the province, the prerogative, and the privilege of the humans alone. That the possibility of agency, the possibility of movement is also available with things, with objects, with what were dismissed as just props in a performance piece. So much posthuman art questions the border, the boundary between human and non-human. Because for a very long time we have assumed that agency, action and movement are solely human traits. Posthuman performance calls into question the anthropocentric idea of space, that humans evolve within space, space exists to serve humans. What the posthuman performance does is to introduce the non-human into this space. It could be machines, it could be plants, it could be animals, it could be just non-living things. And to show that humans co-become with them, that we construct our space through a specific interconnection with other objects. Those objects can be living or non-living, organic, inorganic, animate or inanimate. Note what posthumanism has always taught us, that humans have co-evolved with technology, humans have co-evolved with other species. If you put these two together, you have posthuman performance art's foundational premises, right? So posthuman performance calls into question the anthropocentric views of space. It questions how humans have built space around us. They have attributed agency only to certain things, living objects. And as we know, and as we have discussed in our approaches to posthumanism, in which we looked at vegetal life, critical plant studies, we documented and discussed the fact that plants have a certain kind of agency too. That it's not just animal bodies and human bodies that have agency, but plant bodies also have agency. By agency, we mean, philosophically or in terms of critical theory, we mean the ability to pursue a specific program of action, which the creature or the organism has decided upon. So suppose, for instance, I wish to speak to you. I possess the agency to speak to you. I can speak because I have a specific biological apparatus that generates sounds. I have a technological device, a laptop and a speaking machine, which is attached to it, which is built into it, which is then going to record what I say. You people, as in my audience here, have devices in front of which they sit and through which this voice that I am enunciating my arguments in will reach you. So we assume that agency is human, and we assume that agency belongs to living things such as animals and humans. But what of plants? So, and what about non-living things? So we have generally dismissed non-living things as possessing any kind of agency. And this, under the influence of philosophers like Rossi Braidotti, Karen Barad, Jane Bennett and others, has been revisited. And these are philosophers who argue that the non-living, the inanimate, also possess some kind of agency which we need to account for. Laurent Lefebvre's Living Machine is a famous posthuman performance art. It's a theater box but it's also a human's residence. And what happens in the living machine? The humans perform life itself. They perform living there, inside this box. There's a website which you might want to take a look at, in which this performance piece has been presented. The question is whether the inhabitant, whether the resident lives there or not, the house goes on living its own life because it's automated. Curtains go up, the coffee machine comes on, the light comes on or off as it becomes dark. Walls become transparent to let in the sunlight or keep it out. When you move into the box, you see yourself, and others become performers watching you. So objects in the house and the house itself have a certain life of their own. When you enter the box, when you enter the house, you become a part of that particular structure, that particular performance. And the people who are outside watch you and, oh, what is so-and-so doing? Oh, the coffee machine is on. The walls have become opaque because the sunlight outside is too bright. The air conditioning has come on. The sound system, the music system has come on. And who's this? Oh, that's a human performing in that particular space. So, does the human perform the space, or does space perform itself? Or, to put it in a slightly different fashion, where does the human's performance stop and the performance of the space begin? You can't answer that question, because the artwork is meant to say that the space undertakes its own performances. It undertakes its own agential acts. Remember what we said, agency is the ability to carry out a set of actions which you have decided to enact. So the house and its objects have a life of their own. Then there is Loren Fugue again with Sanja Mitrovic in Daydream House. It's the same house from the previous art installation, that is Living Machine, which is reused in Daydream House. And here, that house has been put up inside a museum. And this becomes a problem because you see, a house is not a museum, right? There's a YouTube video of this art object, of this performance piece called Daydream House, which you might want to take a look at. The idea is that when the house moves into a museum, is the house a house, or is it a part of a museum performance? When the house is moved into a museum, does the museum absorb the house, or does it retain its distinctive qualities? Does the everyday performance inside that house become a museum piece, or is it just everyday life? Remember the YouTube slogan? Broadcast yourself, right? Now the question is, when and how do you believe, do you think that your life, your everyday life, I had just had my second cup of coffee, or I missed the bus going to work, or my car had a flat tire. Why do we put this out on Insta? Why do we tweet it? Why do we put it up on YouTube? Why do we blog about it? It is what I've elsewhere referred to as the museumization of the everyday, where, in an early book, not recently, where we transform our everyday lives into artistic performances to be telecast, to be documented, to be shared. Honestly, ask yourself, who is interested in knowing that I had a flat tire going to work? That after drinking coffee, my throat doesn't feel very good? I mean, are these extraordinary experiences that have to be documented? Is it in everybody's interests to know that you spilled your coffee, that your cat is unwell? But we broadcast ourselves. We document it. This is the museumization of the everyday, or the museumization of what I've referred to as the quotidian, the everyday, the ordinariness of our lives, right? It's not like you conquered Everest, you did something extraordinary. You have transformed the ordinary into a spectacle. You have transformed the routine, mundane acts of everyday life into a spectacle. That's the point. That's precisely the point. So, in a performance arts like Mitrovic and Lee Foog's Daydream House, the distinction between the house and the museum breaks down. Let's approach this from another angle, right? What is your house doing when you're not in it? You've gone off to college, to your job, or you just stepped out of the house. What is the house up to? Now, I'm not asking a question about horror films. In horror films, you know what the house is up to, right? Ghosts come out, all sorts of creatures are there. But mostly the creatures come only when there are humans, because what's the point in haunting an empty house? But we know that the house is there. What is the house doing in your absence? That's the question. Does the house have agency of its own? Does the house have abilities of its own? Does the house daydream? For those of you who are interested in slightly offbeat questions, I would recommend you a novel, Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. Some of you may know the text, but it's worth taking a look at again, because its opening scene, opening paragraph, is a very powerful example of a house which is an inanimate, inorganic, non-living object seeming to have a life of its own. You don't need ghosts there. It's not that kind of a horror story where things jump out of the cupboards, or there's some bizarre creature with 15 rows of teeth out to get you. No, it's not like that. As Jackson would say, whatever walked there, walked alone. What occupies Hill House? We don't know. But the larger question is precisely this. Does the inanimate object have anything like an agency? So, moving on to another example, Maximilian Haas and David Weber Krebs' Balthazar. Again, there is a website for you to take a look at. Balthazar is the fictional name of the protagonist, which is actually a donkey. The donkey is put on stage with a group of human performers, and the performance is the humans trying to engage with the donkey. The donkey is the center of the action, so to speak. And what does the donkey do? The donkey moves here and there. The donkey is not chained or kept in a cage. The donkey is just put on the stage, and the donkey does whatever donkey minds ask it to do. It wanders here and there. And the humans on stage are trying to engage with it. The humans have a plan of action, presumably, on how to talk to a donkey, how to address a donkey. Whether the donkey has one or not, well, that's the point of the performance, isn't it? Then they begin to play music, and Balthazar seems to be listening. They try to walk here and there. They walk diagonally and straight. They stand in front of him, and the donkey moves away. Sometimes the donkey follows one of them, then it stops walking here and there. So we have always assumed that the intentionality of movement, that we move with a purpose, belongs only to that of the human. But Balthazar is about interspecies performance. Remember, humans co-evolve with technology, but we also co-evolve with other creatures, including plants. And Balthazar is a performance which is an interspecies one, and asks us to pay attention to how we interact with other species. I now want to move on to something different. And this is artwork called Rare Earthenware by a group called Unknown Fields Division. Excuse me. This is a series of photographs, films, and artifacts with the title Summer 2014, A World Adrift. And it's from a tour into a very difficult place to get to. China's rare earth mining area in the Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region in the northern parts of China. Rare earth metals are essential components of practically all your high-tech electronic items. And as a result, they are among the world's most expensive, most difficult materials to get hold of. And there are statistics which I have put up on the slide. The production of 1 ton of rare earth metals actually is a long tedious process, and it leaves behind more than 8 kilograms of fluorine, 75 cubic meters of toxic wastewater, and 1 ton of radioactive mud. Unknown Fields Division smuggled its members into the mining area and took pictures of how the mining is done and the remnants of that process, which is called, in usual terms, tailings. Okay, and from this toxic mud, they took some mud into their bags and brought them back. They brought back toxic mud and made 3 vases of 3 different sizes. Each vase represents the amount of radioactive material produced as a byproduct of the process, whether it's for a cell phone, a laptop, or the batteries used in electric cars. So they smuggled in themselves illegally, of course, into the Chinese territory. They got hold of some of the mud from the mines and they made 3 vases. The vases are of different size, showing the different proportion of radioactive material in each product. What does this achieve? Rare earthenware draws attention to the link between material matter and capitalism, between global industry and the earth. That mud is not just mud. Mud is a commodity. Mud has a specific role. Mud is entangled with and within global capitalist processes. That's the idea. One more example, Building Conversation Collective's Parliament of Things. There's a website for you to take a look at. And one of its projects is called Time Loop. And here the collective asked, the team asked participants to reflect on the deep past, a very deep past. And this is a practice which has been native to the Aboriginals of Canada. Conversation Without Words is a performance piece that explores silence. Everybody was astounded that there is actually a conversation possible without words, but it stems from a very old Aboriginal practice of Inuit chiefs who sat together in a kind of gathering and they never speak. They never speak. They sat in complete silence so that they could still connect with one another. The point here is to ask how knowledge is produced. Is knowledge produced only in conversation? Is knowledge produced in communicating with each other without conversation? Is silence a form of knowledge making too? Is silence a form of communication? The idea here is to explore perhaps another way of looking at time, to stop thinking entirely in and about the present. My final example is from Benjamin Vanderbilt Dieter Brusselaes and Helena Julian's Perisphere. This was a series of small dioramas where you can go and lie down on your stomach and look down through a viewing slot. It's like a periscope which submarines have. And through the periscope, you get an image of the immediate environment, except that you're looking at it the wrong way. Because you're lying down and looking at the image on top, the view from the top. So, remember, we are people who walk erect. So, our gaze, our visual method of perception is determined by how we are as people, as persons. We stand erect. There is a series of shifting mirrors in the dioramas and you get different perspectives on your immediate neighborhood. So you lie down and watch through a periscope like this. And what you see is basically uncertain because you cannot recognize where you are and how you are viewing things. The point is, as the artists put it in their own words, what is our point of view? How do we view our environment? What are the parameters of our perception? The larger aim here then is to question various kinds of borders. Let me recap what I've been speaking about. All post-human art is an attempt to question borders. Whether it is Stella questioning the border between organic and the inorganic, whether it's the collapse of ideas of space where the person inside the house is performing living and the house is itself a performance. Our everyday life becomes a performance as a spectacle. In Balthazar, they put together a theatre group which involves one donkey who's at the center of attention and the people trying to engage with it. But the whole point here is to think in terms of interspecies collaboration, interspecies engagement. In Rare Earthenware, we discovered how earth is part of, as in mud is a part of global capital circuits. In Time Loop, silence becomes a mode of knowledge making. And of course, in Perisphere, of which there is also a website that you might want to take a look at, we saw how the borders of our perception, the technologies of our points of view are called into question. Those are also, of course, standard queries and concerns within posthumanism. Thank you.